Traditional songs and folk tales tell us that the plains and forests of Africa once teemed with wildlife. But the diaries and photographs show us how quickly East Africa was turned into the hunting grounds for the aristocracies and elites of Europe and America. To control the hunting and to help protect the dwindling herds, national parks were set up all over Kenya. Today, after decades of persuasion and public awareness, the hunting is over, and tourists now come to the Nakuru National Park to view the animals. They come from all over the world to look at the famous flamingos of Lake Nakuru. The natural habitat of the flamingos is being destroyed because of a complicated range of ecological reasons. The level of the lake is decreasing, while the water is being contaminated by agricultural and industrial pollutants. The result is that quite frequently the flamingos fly to other destinations. For the communities living along the edge of the lake, the flight of flamingos is not only an environmental disaster in the making, it could also be an economic disaster. Nakuru is a town in the Great Rift Valley of Kenya. At the turn of the century, it began life as a small railway outpost. Since independence, it has grown into a busy urban center of over 300,000 people. For many conservationists, the main threat to the surrounding wildlife comes from the populations of such small towns. However, for many of the street traders, the flight of the flamingos is of serious concern.
When tourists visit the national park, many of us small business people benefit.
Business is not good at all. There are very few tourists at this time because the lake is drying out and there are no flamingos.
The economies of people who live on the edge of the park are increasingly linked to the well-being of the wildlife. They are now committed to the survival of the animals and the parks. However, the problem now lies with the capacities of towns like Nakuru to cope with the pressures of urban planning. They do not have the resources or the capacity to implement environmentally sensitive policies. The dilemma is partly historical. Nakuru was designed as a small town of tree-lined avenues to service a small colonial elite. This town was meant to be the agricultural outpost of the settler economy. But since independence, migrations from the rural areas has meant that the population has more than trebled. The demands made by the increasing numbers of people on the diminishing resources has led to a deterioration in the infrastructure. A good example is the pressure for public transport. What was once a pretty public park has been converted into a chaotic bus station. At the same time, small-scale entrepreneurs compete with the buses for space. Everyone is eager to have a corner to work. What makes this environment even more dangerous is the lack of adequate infrastructure. The lack of services is a common sight all over the unplanned settlements of Nakuru. Over 50% of the population of this town live in settlements like this one in Rwanda. They come in search of cheap rental accommodation for their families. It is the women in this area who bear the largest share of the burden. They have to find ways to make a living, such as brewing alcohol. They're also responsible for raising their children.
I suffer the most because the kids fall sick and I have no money to take them to hospital. I don't know where the diseases come from. Maybe the stagnant waters and the mosquitoes. I could get a better place to live safely with my children, I would be very happy.
Women like Mama Uma long to live in council houses such as these. But even here, families are squeezed into one room. In fact, most of the council housing in Nakuru dates back to the 50s. They are badly in need of repair, and under the present system of municipal management, they're proving to be uneconomical. With the desperate shortage of appropriate housing, the unplanned settlements continue to mushroom. But as such construction is not carefully monitored, many houses have been built on unstable volcanic soils, which leads to subsidence. Perhaps what is worse is that the children play on garbage heaps. This not only damages their health, but also contaminates the streams and rivers. Further pollution comes from the rapidly growing industrial sector in Nakuru. Though environmental protection is taken seriously by the municipality, the council does not have enough capacity to enforce the bylaws. Effluents like these can only destroy the ecosystem of the lake and the economic future of the region. As these folk singers entertain the families of Nakuru, the question is whether it is possible to find a new vision for the development of this town, one which combines the concerns of the environment with the demands of development. To integrate environmental issues with development, a workshop was held on Localizing Agenda 21. It was organized by the municipal authorities and opened by a representative of the provincial government.
I believe that the Localizing Agenda 21 initiative can significantly contribute to put such a capacity building process in motion.
The United Nations Center for Human Settlements played an important role in bringing together the various partners.
Local groups and
we expect that this workshop will initiate an important new stage of sustainable urban development of Nakuru towards better life for its men, women and children.
Financial support and expertise was provided by the Belgian Development Corporation as part of their ongoing commitment to improving the urban environment in developing countries.
I would like to, on behalf of this Belgian consortium, welcome all of the participants.
Participants in the workshop were carefully chosen to represent different departments of the local authority, non-governmental organizations, and the private sector.
This morning and this afternoon.
This workshop is going to assist us and improve how best we can work with various organizations.
The World Wildlife Foundation presented a paper.
We take the view that to really conserve this precious ecosystem, you have to manage land use in the entire catchment basin. And again, the proximity of the town to the lake. As here you can see, the town.
Research was presented on the deteriorating state of the ecosystem in the catchment basin over the last 2 decades.
But like everybody knows, development processes usually go beyond environmental issues. I think out of this workshop we'll be able to come out with planning systems that take environment into step.
A priority area which was discussed was the state of unplanned settlements and the desperate need for appropriate housing.
Well, most of the housing was before independence. So the municipality has a very large, stock of this kind of housing. Most of them are one room, that you can see. Traditionally, the approach is top-down, whereby the planning and the communities only get involved at the implementation level. And yet, they need to be involved in identification of the problems and how the problems are to be solved.
In order for the participants to understand the problems of the communities, trips were organized to different parts of Nakuru. One community which was visited was in Menengai. This group is working with the municipality and a local non-governmental organization on setting up a system for collecting the garbage in their area. Everybody participates regularly.
If we clean our area, we can be free from diseases like malaria, gastroenteritis, vomiting and diarrhea. When we clean the area, we can be free from such problems.
The work of this community group in partnership with the council and NGOs sets an example for ways to overcome many of the problems confronting Nakuru.
The municipality has to slightly change their slant and not focus so much on what they can do, but focus on what communities can do, because what they need, the communities, is an enabling environment.
Visits were also made to various industries to see how they could work together with the municipality to minimize the problem of effluents.
We embarked on a major project to have a pre-treatment unit where we will control all the effluent after the separation process that we have just talked about.
Discussions suggested that the only way forward was to create new partnerships.
If we want a smooth industrial development, we have got to regard ourselves, both the council and the manufacturers or private enterprise in general, as partners in the development process.
These are two different types of...
Back at the workshop, working groups were established to discuss new ways of solving the problems of Nakuru. The general consensus was that Nakuru should become a place where urban development could go hand in hand with environmental protection.
This workshop, honestly, I have learned on how careful we should be into really integrating the activities of urban development with that of surrounding environment.
A new vision was designed for Nakuru. It was to be the first eco-city in Kenya. Projects were recommended for immediate action. Communities were to be encouraged to start their own solid waste management systems. The bus park was to be rationalized and a geological survey was to be carried out.
My expectations are that I expect the workshop to assist the council in coming up with the priority areas of our needs.
Oh God of all creation.
The needs of Nakuru are many, but it is urgent that they be met soon. The future of a whole generation of school children depends on it. After all, it is a generation of children which is deeply committed to the preservation of wildlife.
We find that when flamingos are existing, a lot of tourists will come. Tour guides will get job opportunities. Also, hotels and lodgings will exist.
More and more Kenyans are participating in tours around the park. They know that the survival of the wildlife and the flamingos is important.
It is a problem to our future because right now the flamingos which are in the national park, they are very few.
As these visitors are shown around the lake by representatives from the Kenya Wildlife Services, they come to understand some of the reasons why there are no flamingos. It can only be hoped that the future development of the area will be environmentally sensitive.
Ready?
This will mean that the flamingos will never seek other destinations. There will always be a flight of flamingos.
capital of Utah is Salt Lake City.
Its state flower is the sago lily. The Rio Grande forms an international boundary